Rain hit the windshield in rhythmic slaps as Robert pulled the school bus into its first stop of the morning. The wipers groaned with each sweep, barely keeping up with the downpour. The bus smelled faintly of vinyl and wet coats, like it always. On cold days, Robert adjusted his rearview mirror as students trudged aboard. Backpacks bounced, shoes squeaked, the same faces, the same seats, familiar, mechanical. That was the thing about routines, they numbed you, made you feel safe, even when something wasn't. And lately, something was in single quotes seat 11. Always seat 11. She boarded silently, like a shadow with a backpack, pale face half hidden behind wet hair, thin arms tucked into sleeves too long. She moved quickly to the back, slid into the same seat, and stared out the window as if the world outside was less frightening than the one she lived in. He hadn't learned her name, didn't want to pry, not at first, but she never talked, never smiled, and lately she cried. He'd heard it again this morning, soft and breathless, not loud enough to alarm anyone, but he heard it, third time this week. She always stopped when someone got close, as if she'd swallowed the sound whole. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. The kids laughed and chattered around him, their world intact. But that girl, her world was falling apart, silently, right there in seat 11. He hadn't meant to notice her, but now he couldn't not. There was a time he wouldn't have paid attention, not because he didn't care but because he couldn't afford to. 10 years ago, when his daughter Emily was still alive, he lived on the brink of burnout to jobs, long hours, and the gnawing pressure to be enough for a little girl who adored him anyway. And then he missed the signs, with Emily, the bruises from her mother's new boyfriend, the flinching when someone raised their voice, the late-night stomachaches she said were just bad dreams. He told himself he hadn't known, but he had. By the time he spoke up, it was too late. Emily was gone by 12. Now, every quiet child was a scream in his ears, especially this one. The engine hummed low as the last stop neared. The girl's eyes stayed on the fogged window. She held backpack like a shield. He glanced back. "You okay back there?" Robert asked gently, trying not to startle her. She didn't move. Her shoulders remained still. After a pause, her head tilted slightly, but she said nothing. He tried again. "Need anything?" Still no answer, just that blank silence, a wall built high and fast. Robert exhaled and faced forward. Rain streaked across the bus windows like veins. Children joked, argued, shared earbuds, but she stayed still, as if her body was there and her mind was elsewhere, maybe somewhere safer. As he pulled up to the school drop-off point, Robert opened the doors. Kids rushed out, but she stood slowly, adjusted her coat, and walked past him without looking up. Her steps were careful, practiced. He noticed how she winced slightly stepping off the last stair. Once the bus was empty, he sat back and let the engine idle. The seat 11 was now vacant, but it felt heavier than ever. He didn't know her name. Not yet, but tomorrow he'd try again, because silence was louder than it used to be. The morning fog hung low as the bus rumbled through its usual route. Robert's hands rested on the steering wheel, but his mind wandered. Seat 11, as always, caught his eye in the mirror. She was there, hood up, backpack on her lap, legs tucked tight like she was trying to disappear. Chloe. He'd learned her name by quietly listening during roll call one afternoon. Fit her, soft, almost inaudible, just like her. When they reached the school gate, students began streaming off the bus, laughing and clattering down the steps. Chloe stood and walked slowly, carefully, like every movement cost her minute. Up and her juice box slipped from her coat pocket, tumbled down the steps, and landed at Robert's feet. Splash of orange spread on the pavement. He bent to grab it. "Wait," she whispered, but too late. As she reached down her sleeve rose just slightly, only an inch or two, but that was enough. A faint, purplish smudge bloomed on the inside. Her forearm, round, discolored, not fresh, but recent. She yanked her sleeve down instantly and froze, wide-eyed. Their eyes met for only a second. She didn't speak, neither did he. She took the juice box with trembling hands and rushed off. Robert stood on the steps, one hand on the railing, cold air rushing into his lungs. He watched her disappear into the crowd like a ghost. That night, Robert sat in his recliner, half watching an old Western with the sound low. The TV flickered silently, but his mind couldn't settle. The bruise replayed in his memory again and again. So did the fear in her eyes, not the fear of being hurt but the fear of being seen. It was too familiar. He pulled his phone from the side table and stared at the contact list before finally pressing call. "Hey, Dad," came the voice. On the other end, "Hi, Mandy, got a minute?" he asked, clearing his throat. "For you, always." There was a long pause before he spoke. "There's a girl on my bus, young, quiet, never talks. Today she dropped something. I picked it up. Saw a bruise on her arm. Did she say anything about it? No. But the way she looked at me," he sighed. "Like I just discovered something she was begging me not to see." Another silence. "Dad," Mandy said gently, "you think it's like before?" "I don't know," he murmured. "But I remember missing the signs. With Emily." Her voice softened. "You didn't miss them. We're just scared to believe them." He swallowed hard. "Maybe. But this time, if something's happening, I can't pretend it's not. She's lucky you noticed," Mandy said. He didn't answer. He wasn't sure she was lucky. Yet, outside, rain had started again, tapping against the window like it had that morning. The same steady rhythm. But it didn't soothe him this time. That bruise, that silence. Something was wrong. Could feel it in his gut. And now he couldn't unknow it. The bus was nearly empty when Robert pulled up for the final drop-off. Late afternoon sun filtered through streaked windows, casting long shadows down the aisle. Chloe stood, clutching her backpack like always, and shuffled off without a word. He watched her small frame disappear behind the half-broken wooden gate. The house swallowed her whole. Peeling paint, no lights, curtains always drawn. He reached to close the bus door, but something caught his eye. Seat 11. A sliver of paper jutted from beneath it, barely visible in the fading light. He stepped back inside and walked slowly down the aisle. His boots creaked against the rubber floor. The paper was crumpled, torn at the edge, as if shoved quickly into hiding. He bent down and reached under the seat, fingers brushing against metal dust. Finally the note. It was damp, folded once, and stained with what looked like juice or blood. He couldn't tell. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Please help me," that was it. Just those 3 words. Scrawled in shaky, uneven letters, the paper had been ripped right after the dash, as if the rest had been snatched away mid-thought. His stomach dropped. He stared at the words for a long time, the ink slightly smudged from moisture, maybe sweat, maybe tears. This wasn't his imagination. This was real. Someone had written this. Robert was the one who'd found it. The school counselor's office smelled like dry coffee and sanitizer. Ms. Brennan, a tired-looking woman with tight curls and sharp eyes, sat behind a cluttered desk. Robert placed the note carefully between. "She sits in the back of my bus, always alone. I found this today. It's from her." Ms. Brennan picked it up with 2 fingers, squinted at the paper, then leaned back in her chair. "She's a Taylor girl, right? Quiet, doesn't socialize much. Her name's Chloe," Robert said firmly. Ms. Brennan nodded slowly. "Right? Chloe, look, Mr. Harland, we deal with a lot of kids. They say things, draw dark pictures, write odd notes. It's not always what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," he said. "This isn't a drawing. It's a cry for help." Ms. Brennan sighed. "We can keep an eye on her. Maybe have the school psychologist observe. But unless she says something, our hands are tied." Robert's jaw clenched. She did say something. She wrote it down and shoved it under a seat like she was scared someone might see it. "Mr. Harland," she began gently, "I understand your concern. I do. We can't make accusations based on half a sentence. We'll follow protocol." Protocol. The same word they used when his wife had slipped into a depression no one wanted to admit, when she'd stopped getting out of bed, when Robert had ignored it until the pills were already swallowed. He stood up abruptly. "You have the note. Do what you want with it. But if something happens to that girl, we'll make sure she's safe." Ms. Brennan interrupted. "You did the right thing bringing this in." He didn't believe her. "Not really. That night, He sat parked outside his home, engine running. The note was still in his head, screaming louder than Chloe ever could. "Please help me." What she wanted to say next. He turned off the ignition and sat in the dark, hands resting on the wheel. Tomorrow, he'd check under the seat again. And every day after that, Robert knew he shouldn't be there. He'd finished his route, turned in his logs, even told the dispatcher good night like everything was normal. But his hands had steered him somewhere else. His gut had outvoted his head. The neighborhood was older, quiet, almost too quiet. Chain link fences sagged in the dirt, and broken porch lights flickered above cracked sidewalks. Paint peeled off the walls like dead skin. He parked 2 houses down and killed the engine. From his vantage point, he could see it. The house, small, forgotten, pale blue siding faded to a sick gray. One shutter hung loose on the second floor, clacking in the wind. The gate was padlocked from the outside. The front yard overgrown. The mailbox stuffed and rusting, curtains drawn. All windows sealed. No laughter, no music, not even a dog, just stillness. A prison pretending to be a home. Robert stayed in the truck, gripping the steering wheel even though he wasn't going anywhere. His heart thudded louder than the wind. He didn't know what he expected to see or what he planned to do. But then the front door burst open. A man stepped out fast, slamming it behind him so hard the screen rattled. Big, heavy-built, red-faced, angry. He wore grease-stained jeans and a thermal shirt stretched tight over his gut. His voice bellowed back into the house like a warning shot. "I told you, keep your mouth shut, or next time it won't just be the room." The door slammed again. He yanked the gate open with a grunt, didn't bother locking it this time, and stalked down the street, muttering curses under his breath. Robert sank lower. His seat, watching the man disappear around the corner. He'd seen men like that before. At shelters, in courtrooms. Obituaries. Men who only felt big when someone else felt small. Robert's throat felt tight. He looked back toward the house. The door was still shut, the windows still covered. But now, something stirred. A small shadow behind the curtain, barely moving, watching. A faint, muffled sob. Then silence. Then, "Please stop," a voice whimpered. Child, fragile, familiar. Then the harsh reply, deeper, closer this time. "You made him mad again. You always make him mad." A woman's voice. Flat, tired, no comfort in it. "I didn't mean." "Then be quiet, Chloe." Name hit Robert like a brick. His hands curled into fists on his lap. He wanted to move, burst in, do something, but fear rooted him to the truck seat. This wasn't his property. This wasn't his child. If he crossed the line, he could lose his job or worse. But if he did nothing, what would happen to her? A few minutes later, the porch light flicked off. Shadow disappeared. Robert drove away slowly, headlights off until he hit the corner. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Now he had a face to match the fear. Tomorrow, he would go back to seat 11. But tonight, he knew this much for certain. Someone in that house was breaking her. And someone outside it had to care. Robert sat alone in the parked bus, engine off. The dashboard still warm beneath his hands. The silence settled in around him, thick and accusing. He hadn't gone home. He couldn't. Not yet. Seat 11 was empty again. That made for days. He stared at it, at the worn blue fabric and frayed stitching. Stuffed bear still sat there, right where he'd left it, as if keeping watch. His hands drifted to the glove box, not for any reason, just instinct. Something to do, a distraction. But when he opened it, something tumbled out and landed in his lap, a photograph. He froze. It was faded, its corners curled. Polaroid, dulled with age. In the picture, a small girl, maybe 9, red pigtails, cheeks freckled and round. She was smiling, but her eyes weren't. There was something in them. A question, a fear, a warning. Robert's chest tightened. Jamie. He hadn't thought of her in years. She used to ride this very bus, always sitting to rows from the front, laughed loud, doodled in her notebooks. And then one day, she grew quieter. She showed up with bruises she blamed on tripping. Then the note, just like Chloe's, folded and left behind. "Can I stay on the bus?" He never told anyone. He convinced himself it wasn't serious, that it was a child being dramatic. A week later, she was gone. They found her in her bedroom. Bills, a note no one could read through the tears. He hadn't forgiven himself since. Robert gripped the photo tightly, eyes burning. How many kids did the world swallow quietly while adults debated whether to interfere? He leaned forward, elbows, his knees, voice barely a whisper. I didn't listen to her. His throat thickened. He looked toward seat 11 again. This wasn't a coincidence. It felt too close, too familiar. A second chance, or a second failure. He reached into the side console and pulled out the crumpled note Chloe had left days. Go. Please help me. That incomplete sentence haunted him. Robert pressed the photo beside the note, laying them side by side on the dashboard like evidence in a trial, the past and present, to girls who had trusted him when no one else had. He stared at Chloe's handwriting, shaky and rushed. He closed his eyes and saw her face again. That moment she dropped the juice box, when her sleeve slipped just enough to reveal the bruise. Her eyes had locked with his for only a heartbeat, but in that moment, she had begged him not to look away. Robert sat back, eyes on the ceiling of the bus. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly. Shadows danced across the metal bars. He took a deep breath, then another, then spoke aloud, to no one and someone all at once. I won't let this happen again. He reached for the photo and slid it back into the glove box carefully this time. As if handling glass, the bus creaked slightly as he stood. He walked down the aisle, stopped at seat 11, and sat, just for a minute, just to feel what she felt. The windows fogged. The air felt colder here, more hollow. He understood now. This wasn't just a seat, it was her only place of safety, and he was going to protect it. Robert spotted her the moment she stepped onto the bus, smaller than before. Somehow, her backpack seemed too big for her. Now, like it weighed her down, she moved like someone carrying more than just books. She didn't look up, just walked to the back and slid into seat 11, her back against the window, knees to her chest. The hoodie swallowed her face, and her arms wrapped tightly around herself like armor. Robert's chest tightened. Her absence had felt like a hole in the root, in the day in him. And now that she was back, the silence she carried screamed louder. Anything. He didn't ask questions. He just watched. The ride to school was quiet. She didn't speak to anyone. No eye contact, no fidgeting, just stillness. When they reached the school gates, kids filed off in noisy clusters. Chloe moved last, slow and careful. As she reached the front, Robert nodded softly. Good to see you, he said. Gently. She didn't reply, but he thought just maybe her eyes flicked toward him for half a second. She was gone. He waited until the last child disappeared, then locked the doors and walked down the aisle. Seat 11. Same spot, same silence, but something was there, tucked barely beneath the cushion, folded tight. Another note. His hand hesitated before reaching for it, like touching it would make it all too real. The paper was thin and creased, crumpled as if hidden in a panic. He unfolded it slowly, carefully, like unwrapping a wound. He watches. Please don't tell. Robert stared at it. The handwriting was shakier this time, jagged, uneven. A single, long hair clung to the paper, the ends split, as if pulled loose during fear or rush. He sat heavily in the seat behind it. The hum of the bus felt far away. She knew he'd found the last note. She knew he cared. And now she was begging for secrecy, even while reaching for help. He held the paper like it was glass. The weight of it pressed into his hands, into his chest, into every scar he'd tried to bury. Back at the depot, Robert didn't wait. He sat in the driver's seat, pulled out his phone, and searched the number he never wanted to need again. Child Protective Services hotline. He pressed dial, a click, and ringing. Child and Family Services. How can I help you? His voice cracked. There's a girl on my school bus. Her name's Chloe. She's maybe 9. I found notes. She's begging for help. She's scared. I think she's being touch-controlled, maybe abused. The line was quiet for a beat. Sir, can you tell me what makes you believe she's in immediate danger? Robert exhaled shakily, eyes on the crumpled paper in his hand. She's written 2 notes. One said, please help me. The The other says, he watches, please don't tell, she's got bruises. Missed several days of school. Her house looks like a cage. And I saw a man angry yelling. I know something's happening. We're dispatching a field agent. Do you know her home address? He gave it, and your name, Sir Robert. Harland. I'm her bus driver. A pause, and I couldn't save the last girl who asked for help. I'm not making that mistake again. The voice on the other end softened. You did the right thing. We'll handle it from here. He hung up. Robert leaned back, exhausted but sure. He looked toward seat 11 one more time. She wasn't just afraid. She was in danger. And now, finally, someone was listening. Robert hadn't slept, even after the call to CPS after the promise. Someone would handle it. The tension in his chest didn't ease. He'd heard those words before. Protocol, process, observation. But Chloe didn't have time for process. So the next morning, before the sun rose, he entered the bus early. The seats were still cold from the night. He walked straight to the back and knelt by seat 11. From his pocket, he pulled out a tiny black dashcam, something he'd bought 2 years ago but never used. It was no bigger than his thumb, motion activated, long battery life, just enough to avoid being seen, even by a curious child. He peeled the adhesive strip, pushed it gently under the seat base, and angled it forward toward where Chloe's knees would be. It felt wrong, like spying, but what she couldn't say out loud, maybe she could show. He stepped back, breath held. Now, he would wait. Chloe boarded later than usual, pale, eyes swollen. She walked past him without a glance and slid into her seat slowly, carefully as if every muscle ached. Her movements were stiff, mechanical. The day passed in a blur. At the end of the shift, once the kids were gone and the bus was parked in the depot, Robert locked the doors and sat in the driver's seat, heart pounding. He pulled out his laptop, slid the microSD card into the side port, and opened the file. The footage flickered to life. Static. Empty seat. Then dash motion. Chloe entering the frame, settling into place, backpack at her feet. For minutes, she didn't move. Just sat curled in on herself, staring out the window. Then slowly she looked left, then right, checking both aisles. She turned her back to the seat in front of her and shifted her hoodie aside. Robert leaned closer to the screen, his pulse hammering. She reached under her shirt and gently lifted the hem. Beneath the cotton were rows of bruises, some yellowed, others fresh and red, one in the shape of a handprint. Robert's breath caught. Then she lowered her shirt, wiped her cheek with the sleeve, and turned toward the hidden camera. And almost imperceptibly she mouthed a word. Help. No sound. Just that one word. Help. Robert couldn't breathe. The footage ended there. Stillness that followed felt louder than any scream. He closed the laptop, hands shaking. This wasn't fear anymore. This was proof. He opened his phone and switched to voice memos. Hit record. His voice cracked the moment he spoke. This is Robert Harland, bus driver for District Route 18. I submitted a report yesterday about a student named Chloe Taylor. Pause. I installed a camera under her seat. I know I shouldn't have, but I didn't know how else to help her. The footage shows bruises, fresh ones, in the shape of a hand. She showed them deliberately, and she asked for help. His throat tightened. I failed another girl once. She died. I can't let that happen again. I'm begging you, don't wait. Go to that house. Go now, before it's too late. He stopped the recording, attached the footage, sent it to the CPS contact. Then he sat back, empty, the silence echoing. Later that night, Robert returned to the bus and sat in seat 11. He reached down and touched the frame of the hidden camera. Now silent and still, she had trusted him with truth. And now, finally, someone had seen it. The sirens came just after noon. Robert had parked 2 blocks away, the same spot he'd used that rainy evening when he first saw the man storm from the house, shouting threats into the door. But today, he wasn't alone. 2 unmarked cars pulled up first, followed by a child services van. On the police cruiser, its blue and red lights flashing against the worn fences and sagging porches. The neighborhood stirred, blinds shifted. Someone peeked from behind a screen door. Robert gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding like a Or drum. This was happening. The gate creaked open. Officers moved in quick, coordinated. One took the back, another stood guard at the front. Social worker followed close behind, her clipboard tucked tight to her chest. Then came the knock sharp, commanding. No answer. Another knock. Louder. Still nothing. Until crash. The door was kicked in. Robert flinched. Moments later, yelling from inside, thudding footsteps, the sound of furniture scraping against the floor. In silence, he leaned forward in his seat, watching, waiting. The front door opened again. Two officers emerged dragging a man in cuffs, same thick frame, same angry face. Only this time, no power in his eyes, just hate. He struggled, cursed, tried to twist away, but they held him firm. As they passed the gate, Robert rolled his window down. Just a crack. The man locked eyes with him. Recognition flickered. Then he spat the words like venom. She deserved it. Robert's blood turned to ice. They shoved him into the cruiser. Moments later, two officers exited with someone much smaller. Chloe. She clutched a blanket around her shoulders, arms tight across her chest. Her legs were bare, thin, bruised. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She looked like a child made of glass. Her eyes wide, unblinking, searched the street, then stopped. Right on him. Robert held her gaze, didn't move, didn't blink. He wanted to run to her, say something, anything. But the silence between them said more than words ever could. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just stared. Then the officer gently guided her toward the child services van. The door opened. She climbed in, slowly, carefully. Then she was gone. The sirens faded. The house stood quiet again. But the silence wasn't the same. Robert finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was over, or at least, the part that could. That night, he sat alone on the bus again, seat 11 beside him. He laid her last note on the seat. Then beside it, he placed the small bear she'd left behind. Still frayed, still waiting. She was safe now, but she hadn't spoken. Not to the officers, not to the social worker, not even to him. Her silence was louder than ever. And though she was free, something inside her was still trapped. He whispered into the quiet, "You're not alone anymore." Shelter stood on the edge of town, nestled behind tall hedges and a rusted playground. It wasn't much. Old brick walls, a sagging porch, but it held warmth in its quietness inside. Children moved like ghosts, learning how to be human. Again. Robert stood at the entrance, hat in hand, heart pounding harder than it had during the arrest. He'd been invited, not summoned. Not required. Invited. The letter had come 2 days ago from the counselor assigned to Chloe. Just one line handwritten at the bottom. She drew something, thought you should see it. Now, standing in the hallway, he wasn't sure he was ready. A volunteer opened the door. "Mr. Harland, she's in the art room." Robert stepped inside. The room smelled of crayons, finger paint, and soft soap. Children sat at small tables, heads bowed, scribbling words into paper. Child therapist hovered quietly in the corner, offering encouragement without intrusion. Then he saw her. Chloe. At the far end, sitting at a round table by herself. A piece of paper in front of her, a crayon clutched tightly in one hand. She looked. Their eyes met. For a moment, time paused. She didn't run, didn't flinch. Just stared. He moved slowly, like approaching a deer in the woods, and sat in the chair beside her. No words. Then she slid the paper toward him. He looked down. A child's drawing, rough, steady lines but unmistakable. A long yellow bus. A row of windows. One seat at the back, shaded blue. And next to it, scribbled in pink, "Safe." Robert's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Chloe finally turned her head, meeting his gaze full on. Then, just above a whisper, "Thanks." His heart cracked. Not from pain, but from relief. It was the first word she'd spoken since they pulled her from that house. He leaned in gently, voice low. "I'm glad you're okay." He nodded, eyes misty but strong. Another whisper, this one more steady. "I knew someone saw me." Tears pricked his eyes. So many kids go unseen. So many hands reach too late. But not this time. This time, someone did see. And this time, someone believed. As they sat together in the soft light, Robert noticed a mirror on the wall. Just a simple glass pane framed in wood, its surface scratched and faded. Chloe glanced at it, then back at her drawing. "I don't look like me yet," she said softly. He followed her gaze to the mirror. "No," he said gently, "not yet. You're getting there." Her lips curved, not quite a smile but close. Outside, the sky had begun to clear. The clouds broke into threads of gold and blue. Birds returned to the telephone lines, and somewhere deep in the quiet shelter, a girl was learning to reclaim her voice. Robert stood to leave. He paused. Back at her one more time. She waved small, shy, but free. He walked out, hands lighter, steps slower. Not everything had been healed, but something had begun. The morning sun was bright, sharper than usual, as if even the sky knew something. It changed. Robert stepped onto the bus and inhaled the familiar scent of vinyl seats and motor oil. It used to weigh heavy, but today it was lighter, clean, awake. He ran his fingers along the steering wheel, the worn grooves smooth beneath. His touch. Fresh clipboard sat on the dashboard. A new route sheet, a new semester, and seat 11 still there, always there, but no longer a shadow. He walked down the aisle slowly, as he always did before starting the route. Just a ritual now, a habit. It had grown out of grief and turned into duty. At seat 11, he paused. No note today. No bear. No silence that screamed. Just the sun streaming through the window, dust particles dancing in golden beams. He smiled softly to himself and returned to the front. The bus filled with laughter and chatter as kids climbed aboard. Some ran, some shuffled, some argued over sat where. Normal noise. Beautiful, normal noise. Then came a girl he hadn't seen before. She paused on the steps, looked around nervously, then climbed on board. Her hair was neatly braided, her backpack too big for her frame. She looked down, rose, and without hesitation walked to the back. To seat 11. Robert watched from the mirror. Holding his breath just a little, she sat, turned to the window, then turned back, and waved. A small, open-palmed wave, innocent and unafraid. He smiled. "Morning," she called out, voice soft but clear. Robert nodded, heart swelling. "Morning." With that, he closed the doors. As the bus rolled forward, houses passed like blurs of color. Children pointed at dogs. Someone sang off-key. The wheels turned like clockwork. But Robert's eyes drifted back, once more, to seat 11. He didn't expect a note anymore, but he checked anyway, not out of fear, but because he'd learned sometimes the quiet ones speak the loudest. Later that day, after the drop-offs were done and the bus was parked back in the depot, Robert lingered a while, longer than he needed. The sun was high now, pouring through the windshield. Bus no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a promise. He walked the aisle again, slow, steady. At seat 11, he crouched down and looked beneath. Nothing. Just shadows and sunlight. He smiled again, not because he expected danger, but because he remembered. Justice had come, not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. Chloe was safe, healing, maybe still quiet but no longer unheard. He thought of her drawing the bus. Blue seat, the word safe scrawled in pink. That image lived in his chest now, stitched into the lining of his memory. He stood, brushed his hands on his pants, and turned to leave. Outside, birds chirped above the depot. A teacher crossed. Parking lot, waving. He waved back. He felt older somehow, not in body, but in soul, but also lighter. Before locking up, Robert looked back at the bus one last time. The rows of seats. The humming quiet. Seat 11. Some seats remember. Some drivers never forget. He turned the key in the door. The lock clicked. Another day done. But the watch never ends.